Anna had always enjoyed her quiet mornings in town. The streets were lively with shopkeepers arranging displays, parents hurrying their children to school, and the warm chatter of neighbors greeting one another. She carried her small shopping bag as she walked out of the bakery, smiling politely at people she passed. It felt like an ordinary day, until she noticed the little girl. At first, Anna thought it was a coincidence. The child, no older than 8, stood a short distance away, her wide eyes fixed on Anna. She wore a pale dress that looked slightly worn and clutched a small stuffed toy tightly against her chest. Anna gave her a polite smile and walked on. But as she moved down the street, she sensed footsteps behind her. She glanced back. The girl was following. It didn't seem threatening, of course. A child couldn't frighten her. But there was something unusual in the way the girl moved, slow, deliberate, her gaze never leaving Anna. Anna turned into the next street, expecting the girl to wander off in another direction. Yet when she looked again, there she was, still trailing her, silent and determined. Anna's heart gave a small, uncertain flutter. Perhaps the girl was lost. Maybe she mistook Anna for her mother. That seemed the most logical reason. Anna slowed her pace, hoping the girl might come closer so she could ask. But when she stopped and gently said, "Are you all right, sweetheart?" the girl froze, clutching her toy tighter, saying nothing. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. The silence was unsettling. Most children would respond in some way, point, nod, even cry. But this little girl just stood there, her eyes full of something Anna couldn't read. It wasn't simple shyness. It felt heavier, as though the child carried a secret too big for her small frame. Anna continued on, trying not to appear bothered, but the girl kept close behind. The shops blurred into the background as Anna's mind filled with questions. Who was this child? Where were her parents? Why her, of all people, to follow? She thought of calling the local authorities, but her husband was a cop, and she could already hear his teasing voice if she called him over something that might be nothing. Still, as she walked past the park and toward the market square, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random. Each time Anna turned her head, the little girl was there, silent but unrelenting, her big eyes locked on Anna as though begging her to understand something unsaid. Anna's steps grew slower, her curiosity battling with unease. She told herself she'd give it a little more time before making a decision, but deep down, she already knew this was only the beginning of something far more serious than she could imagine. Anna hoped that after the strange encounter in town, things would go back to normal, but life had other plans. The very next morning, as she walked toward the grocery store, she felt it again, that prickling sensation of eyes watching her. She glanced over her shoulder, and there she was, the same little girl, same pale dress, same stuffed toy clutched tightly in her hands. Anna slowed her steps, her chest tightening. The street was busier this time, with people hurrying to work and cars passing by, but the child kept herself focused entirely on Anna. She didn't wave, didn't call out, just followed. Every turn Anna made, the girl mirrored. At first, Anna tried to dismiss it. Maybe the child lived nearby. Maybe she was just wandering in the same direction. But as Anna walked into the grocery store and moved from aisle to aisle, she noticed the girl slipping quietly through the entrance, keeping her distance but never breaking eye contact. When Anna stopped near the fruit section, the girl stopped too, standing halfway behind a display of apples, staring with those wide, pleading eyes. It was no longer coincidence. Anna's heart wrestled between fear and sympathy. The girl looked fragile, almost lost, but there was also something haunting in her silence. No child follows a stranger this way without reason. Later that afternoon, Anna decided to visit the park, hoping to clear her thoughts. But there, among the benches and playground laughter, she saw the small figure again. The girl stood at the edge of the park, hugging her toy, her gaze locked on Anna as though she couldn't let her out of sight. Anna's unease deepened. She sat on a bench, pretending to watch the children play, but her mind kept racing. Why her? Why was this child pursuing her day after day? And why wouldn't she say a single word? The more Anna thought about it, the more unsettled she became. It was no longer just an odd encounter. It was the beginning of a mystery. Something the little girl knew, something she carried, was pushing her to follow. And Anna couldn't shake the chilling feeling that the truth, when it came, would change everything. Anna's days began to feel less ordinary, because everywhere she went, the little girl was there. At first, Anna had thought it might be chance, crossing paths in the market, glimpsing her at the park. But now it was undeniable. The girl wasn't just wandering in the same places. She was deliberately trailing Anna, and doing so with a strange, silent persistence. Anna tried again and again to speak to her. One morning outside the florist's shop, she crouched down, smiled warmly, and asked, "Sweetheart, are you lost? Do you need help?" But the child only clutched her stuffed toy tighter and looked at Anna with wide, pleading eyes. Her lips parted slightly as though words were trying to come out, yet nothing did. It was as if fear had locked her voice away. Later, at the park, Anna made another attempt. She sat on a bench, pretending to read, and when the girl lingered a few feet away, she gestured her over. "It's all right," she said softly. "You can tell me what you need." The girl took a cautious step forward, then stopped. She pointed faintly at Anna, then quickly looked down at the ground, rocking the stuffed toy in her arms like a shield. That small gesture sent a chill through Anna. It wasn't random. The girl wanted something, but for some reason she couldn't say it. Each encounter became heavier with meaning. The silence was no longer simply the absence of words. It was a signal in itself. Anna began to notice details. The girl's dress looked more worn each time, her hair slightly unkempt, faint shadows under her eyes. These were not signs of a child who was well cared for. Anna's unease deepened into worry. She felt torn. Part of her wanted to walk away and tell herself it was none of her business. But the stronger part of her, the empathetic part, knew the girl was trying to communicate something important without speaking. She could feel it in her gut. The child, Beta's silence, was a cry for help. When Anna went home that evening, the image of the girl's eyes haunted her. They weren't just curious eyes or mischievous eyes. They were desperate eyes. Eyes that had chosen Anna, for reasons still unknown, to carry a secret too heavy for a little girl to bear. And Anna realized something chilling. Silence itself had become the loudest signal of all. Anna's unease had grown into something heavier. For days she had carried the image of the little girl's eyes, the way they pleaded without words, the way they followed her like a shadow. At first she told herself it was curiosity, or perhaps a child's imagination, but after so many encounters, after seeing the girl in different parts of town, her silence pressing like an invisible hand, Anna knew this was no coincidence. That evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, the weight of it all refused to let her rest. The little girl wasn't going away, and Anna could no longer keep it to herself. She waited until her husband, Mark, walked in from his shift. The uniform still clung to him, and though his shoulders were tired, his eyes were sharp, the eyes of a cop who'd spent years reading people and situations. "Mark," Anna began carefully, "I need to tell you something strange that's been happening." He raised a brow, instantly alert. He knew his wife well enough to recognize when her voice carried more than casual worry. He pulled out a chair and sat opposite her. "What is it?" She hesitated, then told him everything. About the girl outside the bakery, about the silent pursuit at the grocery store, about the way she always appeared, always watching, always clutching that toy, and about those eyes, so desperate yet so wordless. Mark listened without interrupting. His expression remained calm, but his jaw tightened slightly as she went on. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "So, this isn't just once or twice. She's been following you deliberately?" "Yes," Anna replied. "It's not random. She's trying to tell me something, but she won't speak." Mark exhaled slowly, the weight of his training settling in. "Children don't do that without a reason," he said. "If she's that persistent, something's wrong." Anna nodded, relief mingling with fear. I thought maybe I was overreacting, but it feels bigger than me. I can't just ignore her, Mark. There's something in her silence. It's like she chose me. Mark's instincts sharpened. He had learned to trust Anna's feelings. She was rarely wrong when she sensed danger or distress. Next time you see her, don't confront her alone, he said firmly. Call me right away. I'll handle it. If she's in trouble, we'll find out what's going on. Anna felt a shiver run through her. His steady tone reassured her, but it also made the situation feel more real. This wasn't just a curious child anymore. It was a potential case, something that required a cop's eyes, not just a wife's heart. That night, as Anna lay awake, she thought of the girl again, standing silently at the edge of the park, pointing faintly, clutching her toy. She felt certain that the child was carrying a secret too heavy to share, a secret that somehow had been placed in her path. And now, with Mark aware, the story was no longer just hers. It had become their shared burden. The next time the little girl appeared, Anna knew things would change, because Mark would be ready, and his instincts as a cop could not ignore a silent cry for help. Anna's patience reached its end on a gray evening when the rain had just stopped, and the streets glistened under the dim streetlights. She had walked home with groceries, hoping for peace. But as soon as she turned the last corner near her street, she froze. There, standing at the edge of the sidewalk, was the little girl again. Her pale dress was damp, her stuffed toy pressed tightly to her chest. Her shoes were muddied, as though she had walked far. And her eyes, those haunting, pleading eyes, never left Anna. This time, the girl didn't stay back. She followed Anna all the way down the street, her small footsteps echoing in the quiet neighborhood. Anna's pulse quickened. She unlocked her front gate quickly, heart racing, but the girl stopped just outside, staring at the house like it was the destination she had always meant to reach. Anna set the groceries down and dialed her husband's number with shaking hands. Mark answered immediately, his voice alert. She followed me here, Anna whispered. She's outside our home. Mark didn't hesitate. Stay inside. I'm coming right now. Minutes later, his police car pulled up. Mark stepped out, his eyes narrowing as he saw the child standing in the glow of the street lamp. What Anna hadn't noticed before struck him immediately. Faint bruises along the girl's arms, scratches on her legs, dirt across her dress. This wasn't a wandering child. This was a child in distress. He crouched down to her level, speaking gently but firmly. Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name? The girl's lips trembled. She hugged the toy tighter, tears brimming in her eyes. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said something that made Mark's blood run cold. It wasn't much, a name, a place, a fragment of truth. But it was enough for him to realize this wasn't just a lost child. He straightened quickly and looked at Anna. She needs help, real help. Then, reaching for his radio, his voice hardened with urgency. Dispatch, this is Officer Mark. I need backup at my location immediately. Anna stood frozen at the doorway, realizing the full weight of what was happening. The girl hadn't just been following her. She had been seeking safety, searching desperately for someone who could see her pain. And now, finally, the truth was beginning to surface. That night marked a turning point. The little girl who had shadowed Anna for days now sat inside their living room, wrapped in a blanket Mark had fetched from the closet. Her small body trembled, her eyes wide with exhaustion, fear, and relief all at once. The stuffed toy she clutched looked even more worn in the warm glow of the lamp, its seams barely holding together, a silent witness to her struggles. Mark knelt beside her, his voice gentle but steady, the voice of a cop who had questioned dozens of frightened people, yet knew that this child needed care before anything else. You're safe here, he said softly. No one's going to hurt you. Can you tell me your name? The girl hesitated, her lips trembling as if each word was a battle. At last, she whispered a name, short, fragile, and uncertain, but it was enough to make Anna's heart ache. Mark nodded, repeating her name with kindness, letting her know he'd heard her. That's beautiful. Thank you for telling us. He waited, letting the silence rest until the child began to trust the space. Then came the next question. Can you tell me where you live or who you live with? Her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head violently, burying her face into the stuffed toy. The reaction told Mark more than words ever could. Whoever was supposed to protect this girl was the very source of her fear. Piece by piece, through hesitant whispers and halting gestures, the truth began to form. She spoke of nights left alone, of shouting, of hands that hurt instead of held. She didn't give every detail. Her small voice broke before she could, but the meaning was clear. Mark's chest tightened as he listened. Anna sat close, tears shining in her eyes, gently stroking the girl's hair. It was no wonder she had been following Anna all this time. Children sometimes have instincts sharper than adults. This girl had seen safety in Anna's face, something kind, something maternal, and had pursued it like a lifeline. Mark excused himself for a moment and stepped into the kitchen, radio clipped to his shoulder. His voice hardened now, carrying authority. Dispatch, Officer Mark requesting child services and investigative backup at my residence. Possible case of neglect and abuse. When he returned to the living room, he found Anna and the girl sitting together, Anna holding the child's hand as if she'd been hers all along. The girl looked up at him with a question in her eyes, not spoken, but deeply felt. Am I really safe now? Mark gave her a nod, his expression unshakable. Yes, you are. For the first time, a tiny flicker of relief crossed the girl's face. The silence that had haunted Anna for days was slowly breaking, replaced by fragile trust. And now, the truth was no longer hidden. It was out in the open, and it demanded justice. That night was not calm for long. Once Mark understood the seriousness of what the little girl had whispered, the choice was clear. This was no situation he could handle alone. He had promised her safety, and to keep that promise, he needed the full force of his badge. He stepped into the hallway with his radio clipped to his shoulder. His voice, steady but urgent, carried authority as he called dispatch. This is Officer Mark requesting immediate backup. Possible child endangerment case. Send patrol units and child protective services to my location. The static crackled, followed by the dispatcher's quick reply. Copy that. Units on the way. Inside the living room, Anna stayed close to the girl, offering her sips of warm milk and stroking her hair. The child leaned against her, exhausted, but still too alert to fall asleep. Every sound outside made her flinch. Anna whispered reassurances. You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you again. But even as she said it, she felt the urgency rising. Whatever this girl had been through, it had left scars deeper than bruises. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of their home. 2 patrol cars pulled up, and uniformed officers entered with calm but focused steps. They greeted Mark with professional nods, their eyes quickly shifting toward the small figure on the couch. One officer murmured, "Looks like you've got a serious one here." Mark briefed them quickly, keeping his words precise. "She's been following my wife for days. Tonight she finally showed up at our door. She's given me enough to believe there's neglect and possible abuse involved. We need a full investigation." Child Protective Services arrived shortly after, a woman with kind eyes carrying a folder and speaking in a gentle tone. She crouched down near the girl, speaking softly, patiently, not pressing too hard. The girl clung to her toy but glanced toward Mark and Anna as if checking if it was all right to trust this new stranger. Anna gave her an encouraging nod. The girl whispered again, halting words that hinted at a home filled with shouting, fear, and hands that hurt instead of comforted. It was fragmented, but enough to make the officers exchange grim looks. The CPS worker placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder and said, "You don't have to go back there tonight. We're going to keep you safe." For the first time, a flicker of relief crossed the child's face. It wasn't a smile, not yet, but the heavy weight in her eyes seemed to lift just slightly. Mark stepped back, watching as his fellow officers began their paperwork and CPS made arrangements for the girl. His chest was tight, not from fear now, but from the enormity of what had unfolded. A silent pursuit had become a cry for help, and backup had answered the call. Outside, the night air was cool and still, but the house glowed with purpose. The girl wasn't alone anymore. She had been heard, protected, and believed. And for Anna and Mark, the message was clear. Sometimes backup isn't just a police car on the street. It's a promise that no child should ever be left unheard. The flashing lights faded from the street as the patrol cars left one by one, their work done for the night. Inside the house, the atmosphere was different now. The living room, which only hours ago had been heavy with tension, carried a softer stillness. The little girl, no longer just a shadow trailing Anna, sat in the corner of the couch, wrapped in the blanket Anna had given her. Her stuffed toy rested against her chest, worn but safe in her grip. The CPS worker had stayed behind a little longer, explaining the process with patience. The girl would be placed in temporary care, away from danger, while the investigation unfolded. There would be interviews, court orders, and home visits, but tonight, the child would sleep without fear. That alone felt like a victory. Anna sat nearby, watching the girl's eyes grow heavy. She realized that for the first time since their paths had crossed, the child looked at peace. The desperate pursuit, the silent signals, all of it had led here, to a moment of safety she had fought so hard to find. Mark returned from the porch, where he had spoken with the last officer. His steps were heavy with responsibility, but his expression carried quiet pride. He knelt beside Anna and whispered, "She's going to be okay now. They'll make sure of it." Anna nodded, her throat tight. "She trusted me," she murmured. "Out of everyone, she chose me." Mark rested a hand on her shoulder. "Because she saw something in you. Sometimes kids see more than we think." The girl stirred, half asleep, and for the first time she let go of her stuffed toy, placing it gently on Anna's lap before drifting off. It was a small gesture, but it carried a world of meaning, trust, gratitude, and the faintest sign of healing. Later, as CPS gently carried the child out, Anna and Mark stood at the doorway watching. The night air was cool, the stars faint above, and a quiet sense of closure settled over them. They had done their part. A little girl had been saved because she refused to stay silent, and because someone had finally listened. For Anna, the lesson was carved deep in her heart. Never ignore the quiet signals. A child's silence can speak louder than words, and sometimes following your instincts can change a life. For Mark, it was a reminder of his oath as a cop, that protection wasn't just about arrests and patrols, but about seeing the vulnerable, hearing the unheard, and answering when backup was needed most. The house grew silent after the cars pulled away. Yet in that silence, there was peace, and a lasting memory of the girl who had pursued Anna, not out of mischief, but out of desperation, and found not just safety, but hope. The street outside their home was quiet again, but for Anna and Mark, the night had only just begun to settle in their hearts. They sat together in the living room long after the patrol cars and child protective services had left, the silence wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. The couch still held the imprint of the small girl's body, her stuffed toy still resting on the cushion where she had placed it. Anna hadn't moved it. It felt almost sacred, like a reminder of the trust that had been given to her. In the days that followed, the story did not fade. Word spread quickly around the neighborhood that an officer had called in backup after a mysterious child appeared at his door. Neighbors whispered, some curious, others sympathetic, all wondering what darkness the girl had been escaping. But for Anna, the whispers didn't matter. She carried the memory of the girl's eyes, the way they had pleaded without words, the way they had softened only when she and Mark had promised safety. Mark's department opened an investigation immediately. Each time he left for work, Anna felt a pang of worry, but also pride. She knew this case wasn't just another file on his desk. It was personal now. He had seen the bruises, heard the broken whispers, and felt the weight of a child's silent plea. For him, this wasn't just about law. It was about making sure no other child had to follow a stranger for days, begging to be seen. One evening, after a long shift, Mark sat across from Anna at the kitchen table. His voice was tired, but his eyes carried a fire she had seen before, only when he talked about justice. "It's worse than we thought," he admitted. "But the good news is, she won't be going back there. They're making sure of it." Anna nodded, a wave of relief mixing with sadness. "She'll be safe," she whispered, more to herself than to him. She looked at the stuffed toy still on the couch and realized that even in silence, the girl had left her story behind. For Anna and Mark, life would slowly return to its rhythm. But the lesson lingered like an echo, one that would stay with them forever. Sometimes the people who need help the most can't ask for it in words. Sometimes they follow quietly, hoping someone will stop, turn, and listen. That night, as Anna closed the curtains and turned off the lights, she thought of the little girl again. Somewhere, hopefully, she was finally asleep in a bed that didn't frighten her, surrounded by people who would protect her. And in that thought, Anna found peace. The weeks turned into months, and though life in Anna and Mark's home slowly returned to routine, nothing felt quite the same. The small girl's presence lingered everywhere, not in person, but in memory. The blanket she once clung to was folded neatly on the arm of the couch. Her stuffed toy, worn and threadbare, still sat on the shelf where Anna had placed it carefully, as though it were a fragile piece of history. For Anna, the experience reshaped how she saw the world. Each time she walked through the marketplace or strolled by the park, she looked differently at the children around her. A little hand gripping too tightly, a glance too fearful, a silence too deep. She noticed them all now. She realized that warning signs were often quiet, almost invisible, but they were there, and she promised herself she would never again ignore them. Mark, too, carried the lesson with him into his work. His colleagues often teased him about being too soft at times, but after the incident, many began to respect his instincts more. He had saved a child's life not with force, but with listening, with patience, with compassion. For him, the badge on his chest no longer represented just authority. It symbolized protection in its truest form. As for the little girl, news reached them months later that she was thriving in foster care. She was in school, she was smiling, and, most telling of all, she was beginning to speak freely again. Anna wept when she heard that. The child who had once been too afraid to utter more than a broken whisper was finding her voice at last. The legacy of that night became more than just a family memory. For Anna and Mark, it was a reminder that real strength lies not in appearances, but in the quiet courage to act when others look away. And for the little girl, it was proof that even in her silence, she had been heard, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply to keep pursuing the hope that someone will finally listen. The seasons had shifted since that night, but the memory of the little girl never truly left Anna or Mark. They carried her story like an invisible thread woven into the rhythm of their days. Life seemed to move forward. Mark continued his long shifts on the force. Anna managed her home and her routines, but both of them felt the subtle change. It wasn't just about what had happened, it was about what it had awakened in them. Anna, especially, found herself changed in the smallest of ways. Every time she stepped outside, she paid closer attention. At the market, she looked at children not only with passing kindness, but with a new kind of awareness. A backpack too heavy, a glance too fearful, a hand that lingered too tightly in an adult's grip. She noticed it all. She realized how many stories went untold in silence, just as the little girls had. And though she couldn't chase after every shadow, she promised herself she would never again turn away when something felt wrong. Mark carried it differently. On the job, he became known for his patience and his uncanny ability to spot the unspoken details. His colleagues would sometimes joke that he could read minds, but they didn't realize it was less about intuition and more about remembering the eyes of that little girl, the way they spoke louder than words. In meetings with child services, in neighborhood patrols, he listened more, asked deeper questions, gave space for silence, knowing sometimes silence held the truth. Months later, Anna received a letter through the foster care agency. It was short and written with the uncertain hand of a child, but it was enough to bring tears to her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." That single line reminded Anna of the countless times she had felt confused, even frightened, by the girl's silent pursuit. Now she understood. The child had been chasing safety, chamba, sing a chance to be heard, and somehow Anna had been the one chosen. The legacy of that encounter grew quietly in their lives. For Anna and Mark, it wasn't about fame or recognition. There were no headlines, no medals. It was about something far more personal. It was about knowing that one act of compassion, one moment of listening, could alter the course of a life. And somewhere in another home, the little girl, no longer just a silent shadow, was learning to live again. Her voice grew stronger, her laughter began to return, and though the scars of the past lingered, she was no longer alone. She had been heard. She had been saved. The months eventually turned into a year, and yet the story of the little girl never truly left Anna and Mark. It wasn't just an incident that had passed. It had become a part of who they were, shaping their choices, their outlook, and their hearts. Anna still carried the memory of the child's wide, pleading eyes everywhere she went. Sometimes, in the quiet of her kitchen, she would find herself staring at the stuffed toy that still rested on the shelf, a symbol of both fear and hope. It reminded her that the smallest voices could carry the heaviest truths, and that paying attention could be the difference between despair and salvation. Mark, in his own way, carried the legacy at work. His colleagues noticed that he was different now, more patient, more willing to listen when others rushed. He approached every case with the memory of that night, knowing that what looked small could be hiding something enormous. It wasn't just about enforcing the law anymore. It was about protecting those who couldn't speak for themselves. News trickled back from Child Protective Services. The girl was doing better. She was in school, laughing, even making friends. She was learning to trust again. That news was enough to give Anna and Mark peace. They had not just saved a child. They had given her a chance at a new beginning. And in the quiet of their home, they both knew the story was not just hers. It was theirs too. A reminder that kindness, vigilance, and courage live in everyday choices, that true heroes are not always the ones who seek recognition, but the ones who choose to act when silence begs to be heard. The little girl's pursuit had ended, but her legacy remained, a living lesson that would echo in their lives for years to come.